Hey guys, this is a video about custom scaffold templates in Ruby on Rails, and the promise here is to deliver something that's more tailor-fit to maybe your own needs when you're creating new scaffolds in Rails. And commonly a scaffold will look like this in your terminal. So you'll run Rails generate scaffold and then whatever resource, so say a post or an article or a project, something like that, and then the fields you want on that specific model to begin with. So when you run this, typically a huge scaffold of files is created and you see this giant tree of files that initialize in your app. And what's nice about that is it's just completely automatic, but it also just adds some unnecessary fluff to your app. So some people frown upon scaffolding things out, but in my opinion, it's a great way to, prototype an idea or get something out the door really fast if you need something. So while it's great by default, what I wanted to do is extend the way the templates look and feel when they are created. And you can do that by passing a custom template to the scaffold at runtime. So these are actually going to be within your app. They'll live within your app as a place that Rails will look for if they do live there. So when you run the scaffold, the templates will be found and used instead of the default that comes with the Rails gem. For context, let me show you what those look like. So where this will live will be within a templates directory in the lib folder. And what we can do is create that folder called templates. And inside that, you need to have this kind of paradigm of what's being generated at runtime. So we'll say ERB, and then a new folder in there will be, oops, that's searching. Go back to the file tree, ERB, and then inside that will be one folder called scaffold. So you'll have to have this tree in the correct naming conventions for this to work. But inside that we'll have our basic routing that you're probably tailored to if you've run a Rails scaffold before. The trick here is it's a TT extension, so we'll need to pass a specific file type for that to work. So in this case, we're going to use this as a templating language. To save time, I'll probably copy this from a GitHub repo I have live. Let's go and see if it is live actually first. I don't think it is. So what I'll do is make sure that it is up there. Okay, so within my lib directory, I have this templates ERB scaffold folder like we just created. I'm going to grab the source from this just to save some time. You guys can copy this too. In my Kickstart template that I use for my Rails templates, I've already kind of prefaced that in using this. So some of these classes you see in here pertain to using Tailwind by default. It does come with some actual custom classes that I've already added to our JavaScript folder in that template when it gets generated. So you don't necessarily need to use what I use, but to get the look and feel you see in this video, you will. So you can feel free to do that. So we're going to create files for index. Let's see, new.html.erb.tt. Then create a new file for edit, just like we would in our controller stuff. So our basic views will model what these templates look like when they get scaffolded. So edit new show.html.erb.tt. And then we need one for the form too. So underscore form.html.erb.tt. So like I said, I'm going to just copy this down. Feel free to just reference this. I'll talk through it in a second, but let me do that real quick. Okay, great. So we have templates for each resource that will be generated. So a basic index, new, show, edit for a typical scaffold. You can create your own actions and customize scaffolds completely. That would be stuff you would add to a new folder. That could be for your controllers, for example. That would be stuff that's not in the templates directory in this kind of format. So it's very customizable, extendable if you want to go that route. On top of that, like I said, I'm using Tailwind in this. So we've got some styles in consideration. This should be probably like text XL2 or 2XL, semi-bold. Just spotted that. Okay, so with that in mind, we get these new characters that we're not used to. And what's nice is this kind of escapes the typical Rails thing when this gets generated. So we can go ahead and pass in what will be dynamic names depending on the table name. So if I were to pass, say, post at that scaffold and on the generation like this, we'll get that post type instance here. So it's that typical at post if it were to exist. So this also accounts for if there is like a password digest. If you don't use devise, you can run this digest type in the database. That's commonly used for the bcrypt gem that comes stock with Rails if you don't want to reach for devise. With that in mind, you could go ahead and append that, but we don't want to actually output that in these templates. So it's kind of accommodating for that in the table layout here. So again, if we're going to check if that post exists and then output it here, all the resource attributes on the database. So whatever you pass in the generation gets output. So say title and the body will actually output in the table here. And then we have an actions row that's typical when a scaffold is run. So you get your edit or show or delete. In this case, I just have the view and delete, and then I'm using some basic styles I've created little components from my template, my kickoff template. And then below that, we're checking if any exist by default. And if they don't, we have this prompt to go ahead and create a new one, which is you'll see in a second when I actually run a scaffold, what this looks like. So in the edit view, it's quite similar to what you would actually see in a real edit view in your app views. So app views, so nothing exists yet because we don't have that resource in yet. So inside there, we'll actually render the table name and then pass in the instance of the table name. So we have this instance of that scaffold instance at runtime. So it's kind of nice. So the same is true for new, pretty dang similar. So the back button here, maybe I'll change to button default. And I'm referencing classes in app, JavaScript, style sheets, components, and then buttons. And then you'll see stuff in the forms template coming up where I access these. These come with my template by default. If you don't have those, you can add those or customize them to your needs. Or you can even customize these templates to your needs too if you want to check out the repo, which I'll share. So the show view is quite similar. We don't want to display the password digest if there is one. We'll just leave that in the database for it to be masked. So we don't want that output because of security reasons. And we'll output, of course, the attribute name of the table, the singular table name, basically the label and whatnot, as well as the attribute. So if that doesn't exist, we'll go ahead and edit, or actually we'll go ahead and render the edit and backlinks that commonly come in the Rails scaffold as well. And I think that's about it. The form is the last one. Now we have what is a partial for error messages. I went ahead and added that to, or I need to add that to my application directory. So with views, Rails will look for a specific location. If it doesn't find it, it'll come back down to this global instance of an application directory in your views and try to find a partial that lives there. So in this case, it'll be error messages. I actually need to copy this over still. .html.erb, and I'll go to the repo real quick and get that app views application. Oops, raw. So this is going to loop through any errors that we might have if something doesn't submit on the form correctly. Again, I've accounted for Tailwind here, just some basic styles, nothing crazy, some red styles. And that will get generated here once the form is created on the scaffold. So these % signs here are kind of just an indication that this will be Rails ERB code in the template. And then we'll loop through each of the attributes and display the forms. We could check if that password digest exists and display the password field as a result. If there is a password digest, we'll display those fields accordingly. Otherwise, we'll display the attribute type and the column name. So say it's a text field, it'll display a text field. Say it's a regular text area field, it'll go ahead and display that based on the naming conventions we pass in our generation. So like I said, the title will be a string, so it'll get a basic text field. This will be a text area field. So that's kind of the difference there. And then we'll render some form buttons and so forth. So that's, in a nutshell, it. You just simply pass the templates, ERB folder, scaffold, and then these TT files with the kind of the scaffold you're looking for. You kind of need to be generalized in the look and feel because you don't know maybe maybe you will know what kind of resources you're going to generate. If you're thinking of maybe making this public software or open source or something like that, that's something you need to account for, just kind of being more generic with the way they look. So let's save this down, and I'll give you a quick tour of what that might look like if we create a new scaffold. So maybe I'll just run this as is and see if we get any errors. So let's generate an actual post scaffold with a title and a body field. So we get the typical scaffold. We get all those files, of course. So you notice we did get these created. Let's hope that they look and feel like we're after. So I'll go back to my running app. And real quick, before I show you what that looks like, I did modify my gem file to comment out the better errors that comes with my template. And I wanted to show you a new feature of Rails 6, which I'm running right now, that when a migration is pending, this is the error state you see on a default Rails app, you get this new run pending migrations button. So you don't have to go back to your terminal and actually run those. It'll just happen in real time, and then your app's good to go. So it's pretty sweet. I'm surprised that hasn't made it into the app or the framework for a while now. So we'll go to posts. And this is what basically that scaffold generates. So it looks different than what the default Rails gem would produce. So we get to create your new post because that's what we titled it. We get the post display because that's what we titled it. You can go and create a new post. We get the form styles that come stock. This could probably be better rendered, but if we create a new post, this is the body. This is the show page. The edit page looks like this. We can update post. Very cool. Or delete it. Very cool. So if we have a post, I'll just say post. We'll go to the index and see how that looks. There you go. So we have this table kind of layout going on, and then actions on that. You can create a new post as well. So when there are posts, you'll see this. If there are no posts, you'll see that other prompt to create a post. So that's a pretty cool way of customizing your own templates in Rails. You could do this for pretty much anything, any resource. You can even customize how controllers are created. When we ran that file, like all these files, you could control, pass your own custom scaffold instances in there. Say you want to format things differently or name things differently, you totally could. So I think that's about it. I'll definitely publish this repo live so you can play around with it. The main catch is just remembering the file structure that lives in this lib directory. You can go ahead and create the templates directory, ERB, and then scaffold, and then within that replace what would generate in a typical scaffold over here. You could do the same for the JBuilder stuff too. This didn't account for that, but that's kind of the same thing. I think that's it. Let me run maybe one more resource just to see. Rails generate scaffold project, title, description, text. So this would normally be string. You could just type string, but the default is string if you leave that colon off. So it'll go ahead and know what to do there. So we'll run that scaffold. We'll have this, and we'll get that pending migration error again. So we can run that, and we don't see it here because we're on the post URL, but we could go to project and we'll see this new prompt. So we'll have posts and projects now. So project 1, create a project, cool. So to extend this further, you could get crazy and add maybe a new nav link for each generation. That would involve maybe some more Ruby logic that kind of accounts for what's going in the views, but then also appends stuff up here if there's a generation going on. It's a little above and beyond probably what I wanted to talk about in this video, but that is something we do in our new Jumpstart Pro template. So definitely check that out if you're interested. And I think that's it, guys. So hopefully you found this useful. Feel free to steal this source code up on GitHub, which I'll link you to. And with that, I will leave you for now. All right, peace. Hello Rails is my new course on Ruby on Rails. I'll teach you Ruby on Rails from the ground up. Visit hellorails.io for more information.